They do not hate the empath. Hate is too shallow a word for the tremor that passes through the human soul when it stands before a mirror that refuses to lie. What they feel, though they may call it hatred, is fear. Fear of revelation, fear of themselves. For every empath is not merely a kind heart wandering through the world, but a living instrument of reflection, a mirror in which the unconscious of others glimpses its own face. When I say they, I speak not of a group or an enemy, but of the hidden human that lives in all of us, the one who cannot bear to see what he truly is. You must understand that the empathic soul is not born to comfort the world, it is born to awaken it. To feel deeply is not a sentimental gift, but an initiatory burden. It is the psyche's way of touching the divine and the demonic within humanity. When you walk into a room and sense the heaviness that no one speaks of, when you feel sorrow that has no name and anger that is not yours, you are not imagining things. You are encountering the collective unconscious made visible through your sensitivity. And this sensitivity is not weakness, it is clairvoyance of the soul. But the world fears clairvoyance. It fears the one who sees without being told, who feels what is denied. Every culture has crucified its mirrors, Socrates with hemlock, Christ with a cross, and countless silent ones with isolation. The empath becomes a threat not because of what he does, but because of what he reveals merely by existing. His presence alone disrupts the equilibrium of collective hypocrisy. People look at him and see not him, but themselves naked, unmasked, trembling before the truth they have buried. The mechanism is ancient and archetypal. In myth, the mirror is always double-edged. Perseus used it to slay Medusa, not to behold her directly. For direct confrontation with the unconscious can petrify Narcissus, in contrast, drowned in his own reflection, because he mistook the image for the self. Between these extremes lies the empath, neither petrified nor narcissistic, but condemned to carry the mirror gently through a world that alternates between fascination and fear. His life oscillates between reverence and rejection, between being seen as a savior and being cast out as a threat. You ask why people betray the empath, why they turn cold after tasting his warmth. It is because love, in its truest form, is alchemical fire. It transforms whatever it touches. But not all souls wish to be transformed. To love an empath is to risk exposure. Every caress becomes confession. So they retreat, inventing stories. You are too sensitive, too intense, too emotional. Yet what they truly mean is, you see too much of me. The empath's gaze activates the shadow in others, and the shadow resists annihilation. It prefers projection. Thus, the empath becomes the scapegoat, the vessel that carries what others cannot face. In the language of psychology, projection is the unconscious transference of one's denied qualities onto another. But in the language of the soul, projection is magic. It creates reality through fear. When someone projects hatred onto the empath, they are not punishing him. They are protecting their fragile illusion of innocence. They must make him the villain so they can remain the hero of their own story. And the empath, if unawakened, absorbs this poison, mistaking reflection for responsibility. He begins to believe he truly is too much, that he deserves rejection. This is the tragedy of the uninitiated empath. He confuses others' shadows for his own sins. But when the empath matures, when consciousness dawns, something extraordinary happens. He realizes that he has never been the target, only the mirror. He begins to see the pattern repeating across lifetimes, relationships, and dreams. Each encounter, each betrayal, each sudden withdrawal from those he loves is an archetypal play of light and darkness. In that realization, compassion replaces confusion. He no longer takes their fear personally. He understands that people hate the light only because it reveals their own darkness. Do you see the paradox? The empath who once wept over rejection becomes the one who loves most deeply precisely because he understands rejection. He becomes the wounded healer, the archetype of Chiron, the centaur struck by a wound that never heals, yet whose very pain becomes the source of wisdom for others. This is not sentimentality. It is initiation into the mystery of human suffering. To be empathic is to be initiated into the secret order of those who feel the collective wound of humanity and transmute it into consciousness in dreams. The empath often sees mirrors, eyes, water, or serpent. These are symbols of reflection and transformation. Water represents the unconscious, the serpent, the life force that renews itself through shedding skin. When you dream of drowning or being seen, your psyche is teaching you that empathy without boundaries becomes possession. You cannot carry everyone's pain without dissolving your own structure. To mirror the world and yet remain yourself, that is the sacred art of individuation. Individuation is not isolation. It is the process of becoming whole, of reconciling light and shadow within the psyche. The empath's task is to learn that compassion does not mean absorption. To love others truly, you must also love the parts of yourself that are unlovable. Otherwise, your empathy becomes a mask for self-neglect. You will call it kindness, but it will be martyrdom. You will call it love, but it will be addiction to being needed. The unconscious loves disguises, and the empath's greatest shadow is often the savior complex, the desire to heal others, to avoid facing his own emptiness. This emptiness, however, is not a curse. It is the womb of rebirth. Every empath must one day descend into the dark waters of his own soul, where no one else's pain can distract him, and confront the primordial silence beneath feeling. There he will find not loneliness, but origin, the eternal source from which his empathy flows. Only when he drinks from that source can he return to the world as a mirror that reflects truth without distortion. When I speak of fear, I speak of the collective human condition. Humanity has always feared its own unconscious. Civilization itself is a defense mechanism against the chaos of the psyche. We build religions, governments, and moral codes not merely to organize life, but to protect ourselves from our own depths. The empath disrupts this architecture of denial by existing as an embodiment of feeling, by reminding others that beneath their masks, they too are trembling beings of emotion and dream. And so, society both venerates and crucifies the empath. It needs him for renewal, yet fears him for the same reason. If you observe carefully, you will see that the empath is drawn repeatedly to those who carry unintegrated shadows, narcissists, manipulators, broken spirits. This is not coincidence, it is magnetic law. The unconscious seeks its counterpart. The empath's light calls forth darkness so that the alchemy of awareness can occur. But until he learns to contain his own luminosity, he will confuse this attraction for love. He will keep rescuing the same wound in different phases, reenacting the ancient story of the healer who forgets to heal himself. In this theater of mirrors, every relationship is a revelation. The one who abandons you teaches you where you abandon yourself. The one who deceives you exposes your own self-deception. The one who belittles you reveals the voice of your own inner critic. Life conspires not to punish you, but to awaken you. And the empath, being sensitive, experiences this awakening as both agony and grace. His heart breaks, but through the crack enters light. As Rumi said, the wound is the place where the light enters you. What Rumi called light, I call consciousness, and consciousness, though divine, is born through suffering. To awaken as an empath is to outgrow victimhood. You cease asking, why do they hate me? And begin wondering, what in them is terrified of being seen? You understand that their hostility is the cry of a soul resisting its own evolution. Then you no longer retaliate. You radiate. You become transparent. You walk through the world as a mirror, reflecting not judgment but awareness, and this awareness itself is transformative. It rearranges the very fabric of reality. The energy that once triggered conflict now invites healing, but do not mistake this serenity for detachment. True empathy is not indifference, but intimacy with the essence of all things. It is to feel the heartbeat of existence without drowning in its pain. This balance is the highest art of the soul. Few achieve it, for it demands both sensitivity and strength, surrender and structure, love and discernment. The empath must become both mirror and boundary, both vessel and flame. When the empath finally accepts his role as mirror, he ceases to demand understanding from the world. He no longer pleads to be seen. Because he himself sees, he becomes, in a quiet sense, the analyst of the collective psyche, a modern mystic who listens to the soul of humanity whispering through every interaction. And in this listening, he becomes free. Freedom, however, is not the end of the empath's path. It is only the beginning of conscious participation in the mystery of being. To live as a free empath is to live as one who continually integrates the opposites: love and anger, tenderness and power, shadow and light. You no longer see yourself as merely good or kind, for those are only half-truths of the human experience. You begin to recognize that empathy without shadow is sentimentality, and shadow without empathy is cruelty. The great work is to hold both, to be compassionate without dissolving, powerful without hardening. When others stand before such balance, they are unsettled. They sense something ancient, stirring a remembrance of wholeness they have lost. Your very presence awakens the archetype of the self in them, and that awakening is never gentle. The self, the center of the total psyche, demands the death of the persona. It tears through illusions like fire through dry leaves. That is why the empath, once conscious, will provoke deep reactions from those around him. Some will love him for it, feeling liberated in his presence. Others will recoil, feeling as if their souls have been exposed, but none will remain unchanged. This is the cost of being a mirror. You cannot choose what you reflect. The light and the shadow appear equally in your field. Sometimes you will see beauty so radiant that it brings tears. Other times, horror so raw that it threatens your sanity. Both belong to the same source. The empath's initiation is learning to remain centered amid this oscillation, to become the still eye of the storm where all opposites meet. In that stillness, you do not absorb, you witness, you let reality be as it is, and in that witnessing, transformation happens. You see, the unconscious cannot be healed by resistance. It can only be healed by revelation. When you mirror someone's hidden truth without judgment, without fear, you invite their shadow into the light of consciousness. That is why people both fear and need the empath. You are not a healer because you fix. You are a healer because you reveal. Healing begins the moment truth is seen. The rest is the psyche's natural movement toward balance. But revelation is not without danger. Every mirror risks shattering. If you forget that you are a reflection and mistake yourself for the image, you will drown in others' pain. The empath who tries to save becomes the empath who suffers endlessly. Saving is the ego's attempt to control transformation. But love, true love, allows transformation to unfold without interference. The greatest act of compassion is sometimes to step back and allow another to meet their own reflection. In my clinical work, I observed that many empaths develop psychosomatic symptoms: fatigue, anxiety, depression, because they internalize collective conflict. Their bodies become theaters where others' battles play out. But when such an individual begins shadow work, when they trace each emotion to its origin, they discover that much of what they feel is not personal. They are carrying the world's pain unconsciously. Once they recognize this, they can release it returning it to the collective field from which it came. This is liberation not through detachment, but through awareness. Dreams often reveal this process symbolically. An empath might dream of cleaning a dirty room, healing wounded animals, or carrying a child that is not theirs. These are the psyche's metaphors for emotional labor. The unconscious is saying, you have been caring for what is not yours to carry. Such dreams are invitations to differentiation. For empathy, without differentiation, becomes fusion. And fusion is the death of individuality. Individuation demands that you know where you end and the other begins. You must learn to say, this sadness is mine, that one is not. Yet even in saying this, you do not harden your heart. Boundaries are not walls, they are membranes. They allow exchange without invasion. They are the sacred structure through which empathy becomes wisdom. The unbounded empath feels everything but understands nothing. The conscious empath feels selectively and understands deeply. Feeling without reflection is chaos. Reflection without feeling is sterility. The marriage of both is consciousness. Consider the alchemical vessel, the vas hermeticum, in which transformation occurs. The vessel must be sealed so that the volatile essence does not escape. Likewise, your psyche must be sealed through self-awareness. Without this inner containment, your empathy leaks into the world, feeding every wandering emotion it touches. But when you hold your inner fire within the vessel of consciousness, it becomes transmuting flame. The same energy that once overwhelmed you becomes creative power. This creative power is the secret that society unconsciously senses and fears, because once the empath stops absorbing pain and begins transmuting it, he becomes dangerous to the collective illusion. He can no longer be manipulated by guilt or pity. He no longer dances to the emotional frequencies of others. He becomes autonomous, and autonomy is the most revolutionary act in a world built on psychological dependency. When you stand in your own energy, you expose every system that thrives on unconscious exchange. That is why the awakened empath may find himself isolated. True mirrors are rare companions. People will still come to you, drawn by something they cannot name. But they will come not to take. They will come to remember. Your energy will feel like silence after years of noise, like truth after lifetimes of lies. And yet, even this will not inflate you. You will not claim to be special, for you will have seen that empathy is not a gift possessed by the few. It is the natural state of the unarmored soul. It is simply that most have armored themselves against life. You, however, have chosen to remain porous. But with awareness, you will walk through crowds and feel waves of emotion, yet remain untouched at the core. You will listen to pain without drowning, witness madness without judgment, and hold love without clinging. In this state, empathy becomes not emotion but perception. You perceive the invisible threads connecting all beings. You see that the same consciousness looks out through every pair of eyes. What is there to hate then but one's own reflection? And so you forgive not as an act of moral superiority, but as a recognition of reality. You forgive because there is nothing outside you to condemn. Every soul that has hurt you was, in truth, playing its role in the grand mirror of awakening. They were showing you the parts of yourself still yearning to be seen. The narcissist, the betrayer, the abandoner, all were aspects of the great dream, teaching you self-awareness. When this truth sinks deep, bitterness dissolves. You stop asking for closure because you realize the circle was always closed. At this point, the empath becomes a mystic. He ceases to react to the world and begins to participate in it consciously. Life becomes dialogue rather than drama. Each emotion is a messenger, each conflict a mirror, each love a revelation. You no longer divide experience into good and evil, light and dark, gain and loss. You see that everything serves the evolution of consciousness. Even hatred serves love by revealing where love is absent. Now, understand this. When others sense such presence, they will still project. They cannot help it. The unconscious projects instinctively, like breathing, but your awareness will transmute those projections the moment they touch you. Their fear becomes your compassion, their anger, your mirror. You will no longer absorb energy. You will metabolize it. Just as the body transforms food into life, the awakened soul transforms emotion into wisdom. And yet, there will be moments when loneliness returns subtle, existential. You will wonder if anyone truly sees you. That is when you must remember, mirrors are rarely seen by themselves. They reflect others, not their own image. To be a mirror is to exist in paradox, utterly transparent, yet profoundly necessary. The world cannot acknowledge you fully because your gift lies in revealing, not in being revealed, but the self sees you. The divine within you bears witness to your journey, and that is enough. In the end, they do not hate the empath. They fear the awakening that the empath represents. For to face the mirror is to face God, and to face God is to face oneself entirely. The terror of the human heart is not of darkness, but of its own light. To look into the empath's eyes is to see eternity staring back a reflection so pure that pretense collapses. And so they call it too much, too intense, too emotional, when in truth it is too real. But you, my friend, must continue to be real. The world needs mirrors more than masks. For when enough mirrors stand together, the illusion breaks. The collective shadow will finally be seen, and humanity will remember that empathy was never a weakness. It was the original language of the soul. There comes a point in the evolution of every empathic soul where the personal dissolves into the archetypal. What once felt like your private suffering, the misunderstandings, the betrayals, the overwhelming emotions, reveals itself as a cosmic drama. You begin to sense that your pain was never merely yours. It was humanity's ancient ache moving through you. In that realization, something shifts. You stop asking why life has been hard on you, and you start asking why the human soul must learn through suffering at all. The question itself is an initiation into mystery. Suffering, in truth, is not punishment. It is the pressure of the unconscious seeking consciousness. It is the psyche's labor trying to give birth to awareness. For the empath, this labor is intensified because your sensitivity keeps the veil thin. You feel what others repress. You dream what others deny. You embody what the collective hides. In you, the tension of the opposites is lived directly. It is as if the universe has chosen your nervous system as an instrument for its symphony of awakening. That is both the burden and the blessing of empathy. It is participation in creation itself. When you sense the pain of the world, it is not to drown in it, but to transmute it. You are the alchemist of emotion, turning unconscious shadow into luminous awareness. Each tear, each trembling is an offering. The soul does not evolve through avoidance, but through integration. Every feeling you have dared to feel has added one more thread to the great tapestry of human consciousness. To feel is to know God in motion, but this knowledge cannot be taught by words. It must be lived through embodiment. That is why life will keep presenting you with mirrors until you recognize yourself in all of them. Every encounter with another soul is a reflection of an inner state. The arrogant one reflects your disowned pride. The helpless one mirrors your denied vulnerability. The manipulator shows your fear of power. The beloved reveals your forgotten divinity. Nothing in your life has ever been random. The unconscious arranges everything to bring you face to face with what you have yet to integrate. When you finally see this pattern, resentment dissolves into reverence. You realize that even those who hurt you were sacred messengers, and so the empath begins to live differently. You no longer move through the world as a victim of others' emotions, but as a conscious participant in the evolution of the collective psyche. You feel energy not as an assault, but as information. Every emotion becomes a symbol, every reaction a clue. The external world becomes a dream that reveals the interior, and the dream is teaching you one central truth. Consciousness expands through relationship. You cannot know yourself without the other, for the other is the mirror of your becoming. This is the secret behind all true relationships. Not comfort, not companionship, but transformation. The empath who understands this ceases to chase harmony at all costs. You realize that conflict, too, is sacred, for it brings shadow to the surface. You stop demanding that love feel safe. You begin to see that love feels truthful. The heart, when fully open, is not merely tender, it is fierce, for it sees without illusion. To love as an empath is to see the divine and the monstrous in the same being, and to hold both without judgment. But you must remember, even the divine cannot dwell in you if you have not made peace with your darkness. The empath who fears his own anger, his own desire, his own selfishness, remains half alive. The shadow will not be denied. It will find expression in hidden ways, fatigue, confusion, or spiritual pride. True empathy includes the dark. It says, I, too, am capable of what I condemn. Only then does compassion become real. Only then do you see that evil is not some external enemy, but the unloved part of the soul begging to be seen. The mystics of every age have known this secret. They descended into their own abyss to find God. Jung called it the night sea journey, the descent into the unconscious where all masks dissolve. The empath's descent is through feeling. You do not think your way into wholeness. You feel your way there. You walk through grief, fear, and loneliness, not as obstacles, but as doorways. Each emotion, fully felt, transforms into wisdom. The deeper you go, the more light you discover in the darkness. The unconscious is not evil, it is merely unknown. And when the unknown is met with awareness, it becomes sacred. Eventually, you will notice something miraculous. The more you integrate, the less reactive you become. You stop being tossed about by the storms of others' emotions. You begin to radiate calm, not the calm of repression, but of rootedness. This calm is not passive, it is magnetic. It draws others towards their own stillness. Your presence alone begins to heal, not because you do anything, but because you embody the truth that everyone is seeking, that peace is not the absence of feeling, but the presence of consciousness. And yet, you will remain human. There will be days when the world feels heavy, when compassion feels like exhaustion, when silence feels like exile. But even in those moments, the divine experiment continues. The soul learns through rhythm, not perfection, expansion and contraction, illumination and forgetting. This is how consciousness breathes. The empath's task is not to stay in light forever, but to move gracefully between realms, carrying awareness wherever it goes. You are a bridge between worlds, a translator of the invisible. As you evolve, you begin to sense that empathy itself is an archetype, an eternal pattern in the human psyche, representing the reconciliation of all opposites. It is the archetype of the Sacred Heart, the center where feeling becomes knowing. In ancient symbols, this heart is often depicted surrounded by thorns and flame. The thorns represent the pain of sensitivity, the flame, the transfiguring power of love. To live with an open heart is to be wounded and illuminated at once. The world will not understand this paradox, but you must, for your open heart is the crucible where heaven and earth meet. Do you see now why they fear the empath? It is not because you are weak, but because you are whole. You carry in yourself the reconciliation that humanity has avoided for millennia. Your presence exposes the falseness of division. You are living proof that strength and softness, reason and intuition, spirit and flesh can coexist. That frightens those who still believe they must choose one side of existence against the other. They will call you confusing because they cannot categorize you. They will call you naive because your faith offends their cynicism. But you must not shrink, for in your very contradiction lies your power, and this power, unlike domination, liberates. The true empath empowers others to see themselves, not to depend on him. You will know you have awakened when people leave you feeling lighter, not indebted. You will speak few words, but those words will carry the vibration of truth. Even your silence will teach. You will walk into rooms and energies will shift, not because you control them, but because the mirror has arrived where the mirror stands. Illusion cannot survive. At this level, empathy becomes service. You live not for approval, but for alignment. You no longer seek to please emotions. You seek to awaken souls. Sometimes awakening comes as peace, sometimes as disruption. Both are sacred. You understand now that love is not always gentle. The divine surgeon cuts to heal. The empath, when conscious, becomes that surgeon, not with scalpel, but with presence. Wherever you go, the unconscious begins to stir. Masks slip, hearts open, truths emerge. It is not you doing it, it is the mirror of consciousness working through you. This is the stage where many empaths withdraw into solitude, not from bitterness, but from reverence. You begin to see the sacredness of silence. You realize that the greatest transmission is not through speech, but through being. When you sit in stillness, feeling everything, yet clinging to nothing, the entire world is subtly altered. The collective psyche senses that someone has remembered, and that remembrance, though unseen, ripples outward, touching countless hearts who do not know your name. This is how consciousness evolves, not through noise, but through resonance. There is a profound truth the empath must one day face. The world you perceive is not happening to you, it is happening through you. The faces you meet, the emotions you feel, the chaos and the beauty all unfold within the boundless field of your own consciousness. You are not a fragment lost in an indifferent universe. You are the eye through which the universe becomes aware of itself. This is not philosophy, it is experience. The moment you become still enough, you sense it, the pulse of the cosmos beating within your chest, the breath of eternity moving through your lungs. That is when empathy transcends emotion and becomes recognition. You do not feel for others anymore. You feel as them because you realize there are no others. And this is the highest initiation, the death of separation. And yet, it is not annihilation but awakening. The empath who reaches this state no longer seeks validation, because love itself has become his identity. You stop asking, "Who sees me?" and begin whispering, "Through whom shall I see today?" The mirror no longer reflects, it radiates. You realize that your sensitivity was never meant to make you fragile, but transparent. transparent enough for the divine light to pass through unfiltered. But even here, humility must remain. For the moment the ego says, I am the light, the shadow returns with a vengeance. Remember always, you are not the source, you are the vessel. The light flows through you, not from you. The ego wants to own what was meant to move. So you live in surrender, allowing empathy to remain an act of grace, not control. You feel deeply, but you let go easily. You give, but you no longer bleed. You listen, but you do not lose yourself in the noise of others. This is the equilibrium of the mature soul, open yet anchored, tender yet strong, invisible yet immeasurably alive. And what of those who still fear you? You will meet them until your last breath, the ones who misread your silence as judgment, your compassion as manipulation, your truth as attack. Do not defend yourself. It is not you they resist. It is the mirror. When they lash out, they are fighting their own reflection, mistaking your light for their shadow. Your task is not to convince them otherwise, but to stay radiant anyway. Love them silently from the dimension beyond understanding. For every soul you refuse to hate, the collective becomes a little more conscious. You are not here to win arguments. You are here to shift frequency. This is why I say they do not hate the empath. They fear what the mirror reveals in themselves. The empath does not create their fear. He exposes it. He does not invent their shadows. He illuminates them. And illumination is always painful before it becomes liberating. What you represent to them is not rejection, but evolution. When the mirror appears, the mask must fall. When the truth is seen, the lie cannot continue. And though they may run, the reflection will follow them until they, to awaken. You must learn to bless this process. Do not resent those who leave you. They are obeying the ancient rhythm of awakening approach. Revelation, retreat. It is not rejection, it is integration. They will return, perhaps not to you, but to themselves. The seed you planted will grow in the soil of their soul long after you have gone. That is the quiet miracle of the empathic path. You heal by existing, you awaken by being, you teach by reflecting, you love by releasing, and when your journey nears its end, you will look back and see that nothing was wasted. Every tear was a baptism. Every wound was a doorway. Every solitude was preparation for seeing God face to face within your own heart. You will understand that empathy was never a burden but a covenant, the agreement between your soul and the divine, that you would feel everything so that nothing would remain hidden. You were sent not to escape darkness, but to remind it of its own light. In that final understanding, peace descends. You no longer divide the world into oppressor and victim, shadow and saint, self and other. You stand in the middle of the great paradox, smiling. You realize that even the fear others projected onto you was love in disguise, a distorted attempt of the unconscious to protect itself from too much light too soon. Everything was love. merely at different stages of remembering itself, and so the empath becomes the sage. The mirror becomes the window through which eternity gazes into time. You walk softly, speak little, and radiate much. The same world that once overwhelmed you now moves within you like music. You sense that life is not a struggle between light and dark, but a dance, each step necessary, each shadow sacred. You bow to the mystery and whisper, it was never about them. It was always about seeing. To those who still hide from their reflection, you offer silence, not the silence of indifference, but of reverence. For you know the mirror must be met freely. No one can be forced into awakening. You simply hold the space, the luminous stillness, where truth can be born. When they are ready, they will see. When they see, they will love. And when they love, they will remember that you were never their enemy, but their reflection in divine disguise. That is the secret I leave you with. Empathy is not the end of evolution, it is its beginning. For when humanity learns to feel again, it will remember what it means to be whole. The empath is the first whisper of that remembrance, the dawn before the collective awakening. So stand firm in your sensitivity. It is the voice of the universe learning to listen to itself. You were never too much. You were the mirror that showed the world what it truly is. And though they may fear you now, one day they will understand that it was you, the empath, who held the key to their redemption. When the last veil falls, they will look into your eyes and see not you, but themselves, and in that reflection, the divine will smile